Hey folks, how you doing? Happy 4th of July. It's Monday, July 4th, and I thought I would take you folks around the garden and maybe just show you some of the things going on around my garden, what's in bloom now, and just some ideas and things that have kind of gone through my head. Last night we had a barbecue, and the thing about getting more mature is I can't eat like I could when I was younger. You know, when I was younger, man, I could eat anything because my metabolism was so high. So we had a big barbecue last night, and I decided to go for a walk after. So I was walking around the neighborhood like after dusk, and it reminded me of like that movie Saving Private Ryan. I could only watch that movie once, but as I was, I live in suburbia with like 1 acre zoning. And as I'm walking around the neighborhood, there's just like explosions in the distance. And then at one point I got to one area where they had some pretty serious fireworks. And like I would listen for the whoosh and know it was time to cover my ears and kind of walk quicker to get away from there. So happy 4th of July, folks. So I haven't fed the birds yet today. It's something between 10:30 and 11 in the morning. And my wife was out on the patio reading a book this morning, and she said all of a sudden she heard like it sounded like a branch falling to the ground. And then she saw a hawk flying away. So unfortunately, I can't recognize what it was, but the hawk did manage to catch something this morning. And I think in the last 2 weeks I found like 3 different tufts of feathers. This is usually what I see when they did get something. We lost another bird, and I did try to put the viburnum dentatum here, the arrowwood viburnum, to give them a little more cover. It's interesting as we're out here. There's some raccoons that come every night. I'll see their eyes glowing up on the logs around the feeder, but there's a rock on top of the feeding station here, and I didn't put this rock here, so I'm wondering what animal decided it should bring a rock and put it on top of the feeding station. That's interesting. I did just want to take a moment to show you, I did get to planting my pots over here. So this begonia is new, this tuberous begonia. I was walking around a garden center, and hello Ellie. It caught my eye, so that's pretty cool. And then these 2 pots, I did overwinter, these tuberous begonia pots, but I did go out and buy this one begonia right here to fill in this corner of the pot. So you'll notice how the begonias are getting a little more greener. I've started fertilizing them, and in time, I'm pretty sure in another couple weeks, these pots will both be full of flowers. And then I also did pick up this fuchsia, and I went with a traditional red fuchsia back here because I've seen that hummingbirds, will feed on fuchsias. So I thought the bright red might attract them. But the truth of the matter is the hummingbirds prefer the fast food of the hummingbird feeder as opposed to the fuchsia. But I really do like the way, hopefully as that starts to weep down, this is like a Wi-Fi thing here, this white thing. It'll block the Wi-Fi thing, and it just kind of makes a green wall. The road is that way. It makes kind of a green wall over here. And I finally did this weekend hook up the hose. The hoses I hadn't hooked up, so I took care of all that too. I had to splice. This is a new splice in the hose because it broke. And these are Flexogen hoses. I don't know how many years ago I bought these hoses, but if you ever see Flexogen hose, I don't know if they make it the same way, but I really do like this hose. It's the most expensive one out there, but it lasts forever, so I think it's worth it. I've spent a lot of time talking about this bed over here and how I'm not really sure what to do with it. And, for a long time, what I've always thought about was maybe putting like a little garden pond in here. And I kept pushing it off because it's a high maintenance thing. in my book, and it's fairly expensive, and there actually is a stump. The reason this bed is where it is there's a stump under there somewhere, or there was 15 years ago, so hopefully it's rotted by now. But I think the answer to what do I do with this area is to just create some kind of a garden pond in here. And I'm not even thinking of anything too, you know, crazy with like a waterfall and a stream and all that stuff. But just to start, just a way to get a little bit of moving water so the water gets aerated and cleaned. And I'd like, you know, maybe like a 4 to 6 foot diameter circle of water. And then what I want to do is find a way to have like a small enough stream where it's shallow enough that like toads and robins can get in there and do their bathing. You know, I see robins daily in my bird baths over here. And then also, you know, if there's water, it's going to become the water source, you know, so make sure it's enough of a water source. So I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't even know if it's going to happen. But this bed in general, I think it would be nice to do some kind of a garden pond, and we'll just say now garden pond as the focal point, which would then mean I'd move this viburnum again so you can see it from inside the patio. But a little bit of a sound of water, but more just a place for the animals to get a drink and for the robins to bathe. And then, you know, whatever I put around it, I don't think I'd try to do aquatic plants. I mean, I'm sure I would do a few once I got it there, but a garden pond, and we'll stop there. We've had a lot of drought lately, so what I have been doing is, the reason I hooked the hoses up is I've been going around and watering all my newer shrubs. So it looks like the ones in the sun, it looks like they haven't been watered, but if you take a look, you can see where the shade is. There's still some water left around them, trying to keep them going. And also these astilbe have been just having a lot of trouble with the heat and the drought, so I've been just dumping water on them as well. And then over in this bed, I've got a few new plants I've been watering as well. And nothing too spectacular going on in these beds. I'm happy things are fairly, you know, weed-free. And it's funny, I was using a leaf blower the other day, and there's a hole here, and I kind of stuck in the hole to see if the leaf blower would come out the other end of it somewhere. And within an hour, the end of the hole was closed, and there's a new hole over here now. So I guess in the end, I shouldn't have stuck the leaf blower down the hole, and something is there. And then we've got, this is the Jacob Klein Monarda coming into bloom. But again, I haven't seen the hummingbird on there either. And then while we're in this bed, I do just want to show you folks, this is my swamp milkweed, which I thought was just regular swamp milkweed. Got a nice bumblebee on that one. But this is actually one, I believe it's called Ice Dance. I'll see if I can find the name. But I thought these were pink. And I had a couple caterpillars, but I don't know where they went. But what I'm going to do is, there's another nice bumblebee. I have one pink swamp milkweed over by my shed that I'm going to bring over here and put in over here, because the swamp milkweed really does seem to like it over here. I got out last night and I did a little bit of pruning on this Newport Blue boxwood. So I just pruned the back. So, I mean, this is selectively pruned with just, you know, regular pruning shears, and this is all the junk we got from pruning back here, and you know, you can't even tell the thing was pruned. So I pruned this boxwood over here, and I pruned this little boxwood over here. These are both Varder Valley boxwood, and this one was a little bit smaller than this one, and also this one was never quite as healthy as this one. But you know, in maybe a month or two, it's going to just start to get new growth and fill out again. And if you look in there, you know, I don't know if you folks can see, but I mean, that is a thick trunk on this. I mean, that's probably 3.5 inches in diameter where it touches the ground. And, you know, every year or two, I'll just come through and selectively prune it, and it does perfectly fine. So over here in this bed, I did get out and I removed the daffodils that were in. But before I remove the daffodils, I do have some, this is a Casablanca. You can just see it coming up, Casablanca, Oriental lily or Asiatic lily. I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I put 6 groupings in. You know, I waited too long, which happens quite often. I'll see things and buy them and then never get around to putting them in the garden. So I try to strategically buy now, but I still end up buying things and not getting them in as quickly as I'd like. But hopefully these Casablanca, this year, if we can just get them to take, and then next year, hopefully they'll grow and give me something blooming over here once the daffodils die back. And then we've got our purple coneflower here with another bee on it. I wish I had a butterfly. Sometimes I'll see butterflies on these. And I did, so last week I basically, one day I worked over on that side of the house, one day I worked in just this bed, and one day I worked in just that bed to try to get things under control. And I really wanted to keep going and do this bed next. But after 3 days, I got a little bit burned out. But I got out and I pruned back the iris and got any weeds out around them. My flowering peas, I cut them back hard, so they're going to stay bushy. I pruned back this Hartledge wine calacanthus over here, but the Hartledge wine over here had no flowers on it. So it's growing underneath a Katsura tree, and it's just too shady, too dry. So I do need to transplant this one somewhere else, because my Hartledge wine that's in front of the house in full sun, I mean, I'm still getting some flowers on it. And this guy is going to just be hacked and whacked when pruning time comes. It's going to end up being about half the size of what it is now. That's got to get smaller. My common milkweed, still no signs of butterflies. And I'm still wondering if perhaps common milkweed blooms the second year. Like, there's only one flower stalk over here, and I'm not sure these are going to have flower stalks. I'll have to research that. And then this here is a Stilbe chinensis pumila, Stilbe chinensis, which I had transplanted. I've been dumping water on that. And then this is my, it's a double daylily. And I did some research after I trash talked it in one of my last videos. And I think somebody said sometimes the first blooms come out as singles. So this might be a single. So you see the cluster. It's the first bloom. But then the flowers later end up being doubles. So you see how those are doubles there? So, I mean, it's a daylily. It's pretty cool. I like the pinks. I think we've said that before. So that's where we are with that. And then I did took the weed whacker. I took the weed whacker and cut back my Biakova geranium. And, you know, I'd love to say get down on your hands and knees, use your pruners, use a strategic tool. But man, the weed whacker, just once your Biakova starts to fade, just take the weed whacker, prune it just beyond the foliage and a little bit into the foliage sometimes, and it's going to regrow perfectly fine. Over here at this corner, you see how this PG hydrangea is just kind of growing into the house? So what I need to do, and I said this last video too, was I want to cut it away from the house. I want to remove all the suckers in the bottom, like 5 feet of this shrub, and then thin out the top, anything that's broken, weak, or small, thin that out. and just leave the really vigorous buds. And it's not going to have a ton of flowers, but the flowers will be monsters, and it'll just look a lot neater than this ball of foliage. PG hydrangeas don't need a lot of attention. If you don't touch them with pruners, they're going to be perfectly fine. But if you're like me and you like a little bit neater garden, you know, they do need to be thinned out a little bit or just kept up with, because they can get out of hand very quickly. And then also in this bed, I did go through, so these are my Cornell pink rhododendrons. I did go through and just with the pruners, I just nipped them back a little bit. And I did it in a way where you really can't tell. So I nipped back like right there, you know. Usually what I do is I find, let me show you over here. So these are the Cornell pinks that were planted at the same time, the ones I just showed you were. But if I was pruning, you see how this one is sticking up really high? So I would just kind of follow it down and then cut it back like to here, just beyond a branch, and then just let it be short. I would take this one down, probably cut this one back to just above this branch, take this one down. And so you're not really trying to make just a perfect ball out of it. You're just grabbing, you see over here, you got this long one here, so I would just follow this down, cut it back to there, let it be. You see this long one here, follow it down, cut it back to there, and then just leave it be. And it's a rhododendron, it blooms early spring, so the best time to prune your rhododendrons and your azaleas, which bloom on the previous season's growth, is going to be right after they bloom. So I'm a little bit late now, hopefully not too late. We'll see how it goes. So then this bed over here is kind of interesting. I had petunias growing here. I'm not sure if I put them in last year or not, but I know 2 years ago I had just a ton of gorgeous petunias. So I've been doing a pretty good job of keeping up with weeding, but I noticed there was some weed coming up all over the place. And it turns out these are all just petunia seedlings from whenever I had them in. So I'm just going to let them keep growing. I've actually been coming over here with a watering can and just watering this general area to keep them looking nice. And you can see I've got my first flower here today. But I mean, you'd be surprised how quickly these petunias are just going to fill this area in. And I'm curious to see if they all come back pink or if there's some white mixed in. But I think I've mentioned in other videos, one of the things I love about gardening is the randomness to it and the surprises. So here I've got these petunias that just decided to grow. And then I've got this meadow rue, which grew as a weed. And if we work our way over this way, these are all petunias as well. And then there's another catmint right there growing. And I just, nature amazes me. And these are all my Stewardia seedlings. These are all Stewardia pseudocamellia seedlings. And then in the front here, I've actually got petunias growing with the pansies, which is kind of blowing my mind, because here we are, it's July 4th. The pansies, if they read the book, should be dying back by now, but they look beautiful, and the petunias look beautiful as well. Another spot with seedlings is, I mean, you folks saw how these pots of impatiens, you saw how they looked about a month ago when I brought them outside. There weren't even any seedlings in this pot here, and now look at how nice everything looks. Another 2 weeks, you won't even be able to see that plug in there. My daughter and I did get out and plant the last of the flowers that I had on the side of the driveway. So, I just went to the basement, got some pots I could find. I just kept it simple and put all the same plants together. I didn't try to mix them up. I got different heights of pots. I tried to keep all my pots the same color range. And I just stuck them in and we'll see what happens. Gave them a good blast of fertilizer, and compared to how they looked a couple weeks ago, They're absolutely gorgeous now. And then this over here, this is actually an amaryllis we got for Christmas. Cut the flower back, cut the foliage back after Christmas, put it in the basement, and I'm gonna plant it now. Give it all summer to grow and store some energy. When the first frost comes, I'll take it out of the ground, let it die back, and then I'll pot it in early December and see if we get a flower. You never know. So I wanted to show you folks my new mailbox, and we had maybe 2 weeks ago, there was a rainy day, and I live on a straightaway here, but I was in the house and all of a sudden I heard this smashing noise. I came outside, there was a car almost into the garden over there, and my mailbox was somewhere over there. It was just scattered all around the yard. And you know, traffic had stopped for some reason. There was a little bit of rain. I don't know. Sometimes I just don't understand the way people drive these days, but it happened. Luckily, everybody's okay, and that's what I need to focus on. And so I had been planning on replacing this mailbox for months, so I actually already had purchased this mailbox over the winter. And I just grabbed, this is an old fence post that I had, and I thought I was going to put this up as a temporary thing. But once I ripped out the old one and got the new one in, it just seemed good enough to go for. So I put this new box in. And then I went to a garden center and picked up this nice hook. And this is called and it's got these nice bright, you know, pinkish flowers, and I think I've mentioned before I'm a pretty big fan of pink. And it looks like it's a hot and dry plant, and it's also got it's got thorns. They don't seem horrible, but it does have some thorns on it. Well, we're at this nice view of the lawn. I also want to mention I've been mowing my lawn. I haven't even been lowering the mowing blades on my lawn, both on, you know, the big lawn and over by my patio. I just put the mower on the highest height. And as long as you mow on a regular basis, so for me, I'm mowing usually twice a week, like 5 days at the most. But if you keep up with regular mowing, even though you're mowing taller, it doesn't look like it's, you know, out of control. So like last night, I told you I went for a walk around the block, and I kept walking around the neighborhood, and I didn't really realize, but there's a lot of drought stress starting in my area, but my lawn doesn't have drought stress. And that could be because I've been mulching the leaves in for years, so I have more organic matter. It could be because I don't have a fancy high maintenance type of grass. I mean, right now my lawn is probably 25 to 30% clover, and that's perfectly fine. But the lawn looks fine. So, you know, raise that mowing deck up. I mean, you know, I'm over 50 years old, and I've never tried mowing my lawn at, you know, not lowering the blades, but I gotta say, if it's a non-irrigated landscape, I think it looks gorgeous. You do want to mow a little bit more often to keep it down, to keep it looking neat, but I think it looks gorgeous. And all you need to do is just make sure you keep up with your bed lines with the weed whacker, you know, so neat bed lines, weed-free beds, tall lawn. This was mowed 2 days ago. So today's Monday, so I think Saturday I mowed it. And then over here again, tall lawn, weed-free beds, neat edges. And why waste the money and the water on irrigation when you can just mow it tall, and if it browns out, it browns out. I promise you it's going to come back as soon as the rain does. And then over here in this garden, I've got more blooms on my milkweed. So that leads me to believe that these are older milkweeds. But here we are, hot, dry. They're looking great. The flowers are gorgeous. And our pollinators are loving them. And then over here we've got some Shasta daisies. I'm not sure which one it is that are in bloom. This yellow mystery plant that I showed you last video, still in bloom, looking good. If anybody knows what it is, please let me know. And then this is that little white flowered plant that I only have this one, but I really like this little guy. I should let it go to seed and try to grow some seeds. And then you see all these little white, hopefully they're beneficial, but they're little white moths on this humalo. And this one also seems to be just loaded with pollinators. Look at all the bees over here. And we need them. We need the pollinators. And then this is it's Hydrangea arborescens. I don't know the cultivar, but Hydrangea arborescens, it flowers on the current season's growth. And so it's guaranteed to bloom. And even here, dry shade, it's looking a little wilty, I'll be honest, but it's holding its own. So I'll see if I can find the cultivar, but again, you're noticing pinks. You'll notice that theme in a lot of my gardens. Usually it's more my garden, I go with the pinks, and in other people's houses, I usually, if I'm designing an extrovert's house, I will usually go very heavily on the bright colors in the landscape. And if I'm somebody who's more reserved, orderly, I'll usually do more subdued colors. Whether that's necessary or not, I don't know, but that's the way I do it. And then this is another Asclepias incarnata swamp milkweed, but this is the pink one, and I will end up digging this out and putting it over with those white ones because I really do like the flower better on the pink. And I do also wish that the leaves on this guy were getting chewed by caterpillars. But all we can do is put them there and do our best to encourage them and not use pesticides, and hopefully they'll come. And then this bed over here, I just wanted to briefly talk about. So this is a classic case where, you learn as you go. So dry shade, things are looking to me pretty decent right now. I need to deadhead these penstemon as soon as I can because we don't want to waste the energy on the seeds, and we want to encourage them to just be a tuft of pleasant to look at foliage. But because water puddles in this spot, I put cardinal flower here, and I bought some like 2-inch pots a few years ago and put them in. Some of them died. I replaced them with something else. Some of them died. And I've done it like 3 times now. So I'm going to have to say that cardinal flower, if it gets really dry, it just doesn't make it through the summer. Or the pots I bought of cardinal flower, they were really root bound, and possibly the cardinal flower just eventually the roots choked out the plant. I don't know which scenario. I've only got one over here surviving. Whether that's one I planted or not, I'm not sure. And then I've got one that definitely self-sowed over here, which is also surviving. So I won't rip out the healthy ones. But what I'm going to do is just get some more of this penstemon and fill in this area of the bed and just let the penstemon take over. If it's happy, great. And if I notice the penstemon's not happy, I'll try something else or accept something's going on in my soil here. And then in this bed as well, I still do want to fill in this bed with some Hosta, the same ones that are over here. And I also want to get the same Hosta that these are and finish off the end of the bed over there, just to keep it lush and looking nice. And then while we're talking about Hosta, again, I'm not a huge Hosta fan, but sometimes it does the job. And I mean, this is gorgeous. This is freaking gorgeous. It's a Hosta, just a big leafy plant with some flowers, but for 2 to 3 weeks of the year, it's gorgeous. And I think hummingbirds will actually come to Hosta as well. I've only got one bee over here right now. But if it works, if it's not invasive, and if the pollinators like it, go for it. So I did just want to take a moment, and first off, I guess we'll show you, this is a Stilbe chinensis pumila, dry shade, deep dry shade. It's doing great. Keep that in mind. It's a nice edger for paths or beds. It's probably in bloom. It's maybe 15 inches tall, 18 at the most. When it's not in bloom, the foliage is maybe a foot tall. This is my Actea pachypoda because they're white, and I've got 1, 2, 3 flowers this year, and they're doing perfectly fine. I mean, look how healthy they look. Dry shade. Need to come back and dead foliage the daffodils. But I wanted to, oh, and I still do need to prune this Leucothria as well, which honestly looks pretty good now. So maybe it doesn't need to be pruned as extremely as I thought, but I still want to just knock it back a bit so it doesn't take over my whole yard here. But this path, so I put some cedar mulch down on this path, and squirrels and possibly other rodents like to use cedar to build their nests. So I've had cedar logs in my yard, and I've noticed over time they will strip the bark from the cedar logs for their nests. So I don't know if they're trying to gather material for their nests over here. I mean, these look like, you know, some of it could be bearing seed, but they're doing something with my cedar bark. Which is funny because I want to show you what they've been doing with it. So I was out watering my plants a week or two ago, and I found some cedar bark right on this bluestone here. Right there, that's some cedar bark. So I started poking around, and if you look under here, if you look right where the camera's focused, you see that crack in the middle of the screen? You can actually see that's how they're kind of getting into my basement, or at least the stone wall that holds the house up. So I stuffed a rock in there, but I need to you know, get some mortar and go around the outside of my house and fill in those joints. And I don't think you're ever going to keep all the mice out of your house, but you know, you got to fight the good fight and at least discourage them as much as possible. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was my fuchsia here, which unfortunately is surrounded by sun, and I can't really find a way to not make it look like a black splotch. But what I'm hoping you'll notice is, you see how this branch on the fuchsia is basically dead, and then there's a branch here that's dead, and then there's a branch here that's dead. And I was really having a hard time figuring out what was going on. I had pruned some growth out of it because I thought the reason it was dying was, you know, broken branches. And so this fuchsia, if you look over here, this thing here, this is, I believe that's a systemic fungicide for the fuchsia. But for whatever reason, these two fuchsias, everything attached to it is dying. So what I'm going to do is just take my pruners and prune out all this dead stuff. I'm not going to put it in the compost pile. I'm going to just put it in the garbage and send it to the dump. And then I will disinfect my pruners somehow after I prune. But it's already being treated by a fungicide, so I really don't know why this would be dying, but sometimes plants die, so rather than overthink it too much, I just try to prune out the dead foliage or remove the plant sooner than later and see if it survives. I suspect the only branches I see on this fuchsia that are dying are the ones, like even over here. This one goes all the way back to the other side of the plant. So what I'm trying to say is the way I usually do things is, rather than trying to find a spray or something to put on it to kill more stuff, if something's not growing, I'll just prune it out, see if everything else starts growing. If everything else doesn't start growing, remove the shrub or the plant entirely, and then try a different plant that maybe grows better. Might as well just show you folks how the elephant ears are looking, and they're starting to kind of get some new growth now. The foliage is greening up. You know, I've been fertilizing these every 2 weeks. And I've still got, I cut the flowers off, but I still got a flower here. Still got a flower here. But they're starting to, this is interesting. This leaf here, it never really got out. There we go. But they're starting to green up. So again, it's 4th of July. So if I just keep fertilizing and watering on a regular basis, let's say give it 3 or 4 weeks, you know, these will be just like a hedge, just blocking any view through them. And I mean, look at how nice and deep green this foliage is compared to when I started the season. Before we wrap this one up, folks, I wanted to share what I think is a kind of a funny story or interesting story. I've been watching a lot of videos by a guy named Eckhart Tolle. He's a spiritual teacher. I guess he wrote a few books that are pretty popular. Thank goodness we have YouTube now where we don't have to read the whole book. We can just get little tidbits of information. It's helped me somewhat to try to make sense out of the chaos that is life. But there's still a lot of chaos left. But I was watching one of his videos and he said, you know, if you're talking to a child or anybody, don't say, you know, like, don't say this is a sugar maple. Because if you say this is you're saying this is how a sugar maple behaves. This is exactly, if it's a sugar maple, this is how it behaves. You would say, you know, this is called a sugar maple. Don't say it's a plant, say it's called a plant. It's a plant called, because by saying it's a plant called, we're giving it the opportunity to be its own sense of self, as opposed to just, this is what it is, you know. I'm a landscaper, so that means I'm like